I've completed all the mods 10 from start to finish twice now, but I've always found the most difficult part is the early game where you're just getting your feet through the door. We're talking, you've not killed the Ender Dragon, no flight options, no quarry, but you've still got your eyes set on the ATM star. So I've compiled a list of over 50 tips and tricks that you can do in the early game, from the cheapest flight options, the starter bases, and even passive resource generation. Even if you're a modded Minecraft veteran, there will definitely be something that you can learn from this list. So without further ado, let's begin. Now this won't be a complete starter guide or anything like that, but this is going to be some tips for you to start your ATM world or the next playthrough you have. Adding on from that, I've already seen a few videos from some ATM content creators of some beginning tips and tricks, so these are going to try and be completely different to what they produced. So without further ado, let's go. Now the first one I want to start with is the Mine Colonies supply camp or the supply ship. Now, you might not necessarily know what Mine Colonies is or be interested in starting Mine Colonies itself. It's basically a mod where you can have a small village that builds on and gradually expands. It's not required for the ATM star, so a lot of people tend to avoid it, but it has a really interesting starting point where you can go for the supply camp or supply ship. Here's 9 of the bonus chests that you can start when you create a world, and I found it in one of them. And then I spawned in 14 basic villager chests, and I found one in there. So it's not particularly common, but it's not uncommon. Now you can also craft this, and I'd recommend you craft this before you make it something like a bed. As you can see, the recipe is pretty simple. You just need some boat chest, doesn't matter about the type of boat, and you just need a white banner, so you do need to get white wool for this. And the main reason I'd suggest you start this off is because it gives you an opportunity to have a starter base. Now, you can pick from a load of different styles. It gives you a sort of quick template starter base. It's nothing spectacular, but it's better than just living in a dirt hut for the first night. As you can see, a lot of them often contain some supplies and some loot. I'd really advise that you go through these packs and find something that's going to play with your play style or in the area that you're currently living in. However, if you're going for just purely based on resources, the best one I could recommend to you is the Crimson Keep, down at the bottom here under the style colonies. Now, you will have to spawn this in by pressing the tick mark. And as you can see, once it's spawned in, it cleared out a lot of this area here. I'll go through some of the resources and why I would particularly choose this one. Now, the main thing is obviously you've got these blocks of emerald here. You start off with sugarcane and bamboo, so you won't have to go and forage for bamboo. You get every type of sapling under the sun, which is fantastic. The basic starting stuff for Mine Colonies itself, 2 cows, anvils, furnaces, beds. But the main thing about this build is inside here. So inside here, you have a fully functioning vanilla moss farm, which you can use by going up to the top here and putting in some bone meal. I'll show you that quickly over here. You just throw in some bone meal down here and it will actually produce moss. As you can see from this chest here, it's done a pretty good job. Or if you have no need for moss, it's actually a really good start on resources. So for example, in this one, you can get a head start on dispensers, droppers, most importantly though, 24 hoppers, 13 pistons, ton of redstone components, and some sticky pistons. So if you want a major head start, I definitely recommend having a look at the supply camp or supply ship. This is my recommendation if you're going for just resources though. But again, pick the one that you want. It's your Let's Play. So the next thing I'd like to show you is in the Just Dire Things mod. Now ATM has a quest book and a guide for this mod, so I totally recommend having a look into it as one of your first mods. And I won't show the full thing off here, but there's different tiers of this goo, and that's how you get the base materials of things. So as you can see, I'm going to put iron blocks towards this goo, and if I turn off my shaders, you'll see it then spreads this goo. So once the goo spread to all of the block, you'll see here it now has turned into these ferrocore crystals. Now this is the first tier. You break that, you harvest it, and then you whack it in a furnace to receive the ferrocore ingots. You continue this trend until you get to the blaze bloom stuff. Now the blaze bloom stuff is really interesting. It does require you go to the nether because it's fueled by either blaze powder or the nether warts. So you'll have to make sure you've got those. And again, same story here. This time you can put gold on it. You can also use the same previous the iron material. It basically tears up every time. So as you can see here, exactly the same process. And it also did the one at the back. And you just harvest these up. And once that's done, whack that in a furnace. And you've got blaze gold ingots. Now there are 2 tools that I specifically want to show this time. One is the blaze jet wand and the polymorphic wand, and I'll show those in turn. Now the blaze jet wand is really interesting because it's made simply from the ferrocore and the gold, and you right click and you'll see it gives you a boost. Now you can use this infinitely, as you can see here, and you basically get early game flight. And the second really interesting thing about this wand is you can now negate all fall damage. I'll demonstrate this jumping off this tree here. If I have this in my hand, I take no fall damage. I'm going to boost myself back up here, and I put it in my offhand. I also take no fall damage. However, if I now take it completely out of my hand, I now take the fall damage. So you can just have this in your offhand. You'll completely negate any damage you take from fall damage. Not only that, but you obviously get the flying capabilities. I would say this is much more useful than a shield in early game. Now, as if that wasn't already super useful, it has a secondary ability here that if I hold shift, you can see it has lava repair. Now, all of the Blaze Gold tools have this lava repair ability, which basically means you throw it in lava to repair it. You'll see here, has a funky animation. And then once it's done, turns that into obsidian, and you now have a fully repaired BlazeJet wand. Now, that is infinitely renewable. You can keep using this as long as you just fuel it up with lava. So if you go into the nether, you can fly forever, throw it back into a lava lake, and then just keep going. It's so cool. Now, the second thing I want to show you from the Blaze Gold stuff is this polymorphic wand. You can see it requires this polymorphic catalyst, which is just the Blaze Gold mixed with the nether wart, and you get 4. That's how you make the wand, but you also will need some of this polymorphic catalyst on its own, and what you do is simply drop it into water. You'll see it completely changes the water, and you just right click, and now you have polymorphic fluid in that polymorphic wand. Try saying that 5 times in a row. Now, this wand is super useful because we've all been there where you need to go and find a specific mob, a cow, a pig, or whatever, but all you're getting nearby is just chickens or something. So I'll spawn in a chicken here, and you can right click this chicken and it will pick any random passive mob to turn into. So in this case, we got a camel, brilliant. We got a squid, axolotl, camel again, strider, bat. Oh no, I have to chase this one. This was a terrible idea. I can't get it. Even back to a frog. We've got cows, we've also got pandas. So as you can see, you can turn it into basically any other passive mob. But as you can see, it also works for hostile mobs. If I right click, it can turn into different things. So here's a skeleton horse, here's a blaze, zombie horse, piglin, even a shulker. You can get access to shulkers early game without even going to the end. How incredible. A guardian, you don't even need to find that farm. I've got evokers as well. So you can get raid mob bosses without actually having to do a raid. Any single one of the hostile mobs that you get in vanilla Minecraft, this can turn into. So as you can see, it's pretty incredible. Now, the next thing I show, I think it's been shown off quite a few times, and it's the harvester pylon. As you can see, you have to go to the nether beforehand because you need blackstone and quartz. But this allows you to feed in like a hoe, and you can have things auto-harvested from your farms. So you can also extend the working area here by clicking, so now you can have it as a 9x9. Now, another sort of known fact is that you can put a stone hoe in your crafting table. It will turn it into a silent gear hoe, and if you put that in, it will never break. The hoe will never actually break. It will be used, but the durability will not go past 0, and therefore it will just keep going and working away. However, I think I have something that's even better than this. Now, as Blaze Gold requires you to go to the nether, you can probably get these about the same time, but I would totally recommend the Blaze Gold hoe a lot more. As an example, I'm going to make a full farm here. Now, it has this accelerated growth speed, so you'll see instead of doing 1 tick, it'll actually grow a little bit further. So here, for example, in that 1 tick, it grew to 43%. How crazy is that? And on top of that, it has an auto-harvesting feature. Now, I'm trying to get one in action, so I'll wait until this happens. When the crop reaches its fully grown potential, it will instantly harvest like this, and it will drop the items. You'll see they also disappear really quickly. The main purpose of this is for you to get an item collector, just here. Again, pretty simple recipe, does require a diamond. And you select the radius in which you want to collect items from. So you'll see here as an example, I've now created the radius around the farms, and you'll see that all the stuff that got harvested gets put now in this chest. And there we go, we just had another one go as well. You can turn off this render area as well, so it just does this passively. So at the same sort of point in the game where you'd be going to the nether, you can also get this, but it grows faster, it auto harvests, and all you need is just the additional item collector. In my opinion, this is so much better than the harvester pylon. It doesn't rely on this strange silent gear glitch for these hoes to work. Now, I really love the Just Dire Things mod. It's such a great addition to the 1.21 scene. So the next tip is actually to do with this item behind me, or this block behind me. It is all the modium. Now, I know this is early game, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of a tip for early game that can help you get to this quicker. Now, the normal progression usually involves you having to create a diamond pickaxe and then upgrading it to netherite, because diamond cannot mine all the modium, but netherite can. However, the main problem is that takes quite a lot of time. You've got to find the smithing template and the netherite ingot, and eventually you will get to that, but definitely not early game. Now, this is where the next best thing comes into play. This is the inferium pickaxe. It has a little bit more durability than the diamond pickaxe. It requires just a couple more diamonds, and then the inferium essence and prosperity shot, which you will find in abundance when you're mining. The interesting thing is that it is netherite tier, meaning you can mine all the modium quite easily. And it's also upgradable to the next tier, or you can turn it into the Paxel, which allows you to use the axe, shovel, and pickaxe all together in one tool. It is significantly easier to craft, so definitely do this in the next time you're playing all the mods 10. Another really cool item is the one from XyCraft, called the balloon on a stick. Really simple crafting recipe requiring a lead, wool, and then just log. And this gives you an option for early game flight. You place down this, and you see it'll now expand, and you get flight, and you'll have a cool little balloon on your back. Now, this does mean that you're tethered to this block now. So if you do pull away too far, it bursts. There you go. So it's infinite flight, but in a very small range, which means this is super useful if you're doing something like building or just trying to climb a tree early game. So for example, here I can now climb over this tree and now I'm on top. So super cool. And it's the best early game source of flight for literally nothing. Now the next thing I want to show is the XyCraft extractor. It's not a particularly simple recipe, it does require the pointed dripstone, but again, this is pretty early game stuff. The extractor has so many different recipes here, 28 pages. I would totally recommend you see each and every one of these, they're very cool. Most of your renewable items can be generated in this way, and it's super, super useful. But there's going to be one that I'm going to show you in particular. Now, using this small little area, you can make a completely automatic slime ball farm. The way that you do that is by having one of the extractors creating this recipe here, which produces bioresin. It literally is just a leaf log extractor. Now, if you have this over a drying basin, you'll see it fills it up just like that over here. And once it gets to 1000 millibuckets, now I'm going to just break this extractor to show you what's going on, but you can just leave this running because it's got a hopper underneath it. You'll see it then starts to dry. Okay, so once it's finished, it will now produce this block of resin. And if you just have a hopper underneath it, remove this. Oh, I've got this lever here now, but it will automatically get put into there. So I'm going to put that back. Now, this block of resin can then be crafted down into resin balls, which can be used for basically most recipes involving slime. Now, some recipes might not actually allow you to do this, but there's a really interesting recipe that you can do, which is when you convert it into its resin balls, then put it back in, you'll see you get the option now of having it as a slime block or a block of resin. So you can make slime balls directly from this by just recrafting it. Anything that doesn't use that, it can now do that. So super, super useful early game slime ball recipe. And this can just be generating in the background passively. You see, look, it's already produced a block of resin in the time that I've been talking about this. The next set of tips is going to be to do with EvilCraft. Now, again, this is not going to be a proper tutorial, so I'd recommend that you consult I recommend that you actually consult down in here the actual way of starting EvilCraft down in the magic section. And there's a whole guide here. You'll need to craft these blood extractors, which are really simple to craft. You come across these dark gems when you're mining, and you need spikes, really simple craft. You can also combine them together in a crafting table, and that'll double their inventory here. So as you can see, you can just keep combining them, and now I've got like a 20,000 millibuckets of blood in this extractor. And you get the blood from killing things whilst you've got this in your inventory or offhand. So I want to show you the blood chest. It's one of the items you'll be first making. The first thing you're going to want to do is put a pool of blood, 5 blood bits specifically, and then throw in a dark gem. That will then turn it into this dark power gem. Now, if you leave the blood in here too long, what will happen is it will actually harden into hardened blood. I'm going to leave one in there. Now, similar to what I showed you earlier with this drying basin, you can also put the blood in here by just right-clicking. And as you can see, it will fill this cauldron. So within no time at all, you can then get this hardened blood from here. You smelt it up into the dark blood shards, then into the infusion core, and that's how you can make either the blood infuser, the purifier, and the chest, which I will be showing in just a sec. The alternative way, if you haven't got this drying basin, is just leave it down and it will dry. And the correct tool to harvest is a flint and steel, bit of a weird one. But as you can see, you right-click it, and that will automatically give you the blood shards. But I think it gives you a random number of them. The main item I would like to show you is this blood chest. The blood chest is really interesting because it has the ability to repair tools. All you need to do is give it some of the blood, and you can either do that by putting it in there, or you can just right-click, and as you can see, it will fill up your chest with that. And you just simply put in items here, and you can see, if I look at the durability, it's going up slowly. You can just leave some of your tools in here. Let's say you've done a bit of a mining session, put all your stuff in here, go off, come back, and now your tools should be completely ready. As you can see, it's not that slow at all. It's already done, and that was only a few seconds whilst I was demoing it. Now, in other tips and tricks videos, I've seen people talk about the Vengeance pickaxe, which is super, super useful. It's not particularly difficult to craft. You will have to go into these dark sticks, and I'll let you guys figure out how that's made. But you'll see it's a really cheap way of getting fortune, and not only fortune, fortune 5. It's a really easy way of getting fortune early game. Now, the difficulty with this tool is that it's got this other enchantment, Curse of Vengeance, which is a real pain. If you start breaking blocks, what you will find is spooky stuff starts happening, and you'll probably get attacked by some sort of... or you'll just have haunting noises constantly. It's not great. You'll probably want to put this enchantment on a completely different pickaxe. So the way that you're actually going to be able to extract this enchantment is, first of all, by creating the blood purifier. The second thing you're going to need is what's called a blood book. And if you have a look at the recipe, you're required to have a blood infuser with this first level of tenacity. It's not a particularly difficult recipe. It requires an iron block and 10 buckets of blood. And once you've done that and created your promise of tenacity, you can just put a book in there, right-click with some blood, and you'll see it will then create this book, which will come out of here. And what you do with that is you just right-click the blood in the purifier, put your tool in, and put your book in. And you can see within a few moments, we've now got the Enchanted Book and the Vengeance Pickaxe. So if I pull both of those out of here, and as you can see, I've now taken off the Curse of Vengeance and left the Fortune 5. But if I put this back in with the same thing and a book, so you can actually extract those books one at a time or keep the Fortune 5 Vengeance Pickaxe. Now, in my opinion, the better way of extracting enchantments is by using a obsidian, an anvil, and some books. And what you need to do is pop the obsidian down, pop the books down with the pickaxe, and just drop an anvil on top. And as you can see, the enchantments come off of it like a treat. And there you go. We've now got the Fortune 5 book and the Curse of Vengeance and the Vengeance Pickaxe on its own. That one's really useful because it doesn't require this whole setup, but I thought I'd show the way that you're supposed to do it with EvilCraft, and then I showed the easier way. Now, I think one of the main techniques of getting even higher fortune is by doing that exact same thing again and combining those Fortune 5 books in an anvil. But I'm going to show you an even cooler way of doing it that wasn't actually possible until the Create Enchantments mod was added. I'm going to show you that by doing a couple of tips beforehand, and then it will all converge into these massive tips. The first of many of these tips is to do with ore doubling. Now, you can make one of these ore hammers from various different materials here. You can see it's quite simple to make. 2 copper blocks, in this case 2 iron blocks. You can make bronze, invite, and platinum. And what you do is you combine the ore hammer with one of the raw iron or materials that you're using. It will then create iron dust, and in return, it will also use one of the durability. Apart from that, ore hammer does have some other uses. So, for example, you can use it to repulverize your dust. You can use it to make plates, which are used in a few recipes. And you can use it to make copper rods over here as well. So the next thing I want to show you is using all of that, you can make fluid tanks. The printer from Enchantment Industries using brass might require a little bit more effort. And you can make a fluid tank here by combining all of this. The XP Drain Singularity Tank from Mob Grinding Utils allows you to put a drain down and you can stand on it. And as you can see, it will turn your experience into fluid experience. So what you can do is right click it with a glass bottle and you can get bottles of enchanting, or you can get them through other means. You then right click the bottles of enchanting on a fluid hatch, and as you can see, we are now filling up the printer with liquid experience. So if you don't have the full experience farm from Create, this is the best sort of strategy you can use to adopt this. However, another useful tip is that once you've actually got so much of this liquid experience, you can put it into a compacting place here to get this block of experience. And when you right click the block of experience on the fluid hatch, it turns it into an experience hatch. Now this is even better because once you've got this, you don't have to do the bottle of enchanting stuff. You can just right click and it will turn all of your experience that you have into the liquid experience used in Create. So as an example here, I'm going to set my XP level to 100. I'm going to right click and you'll see right now it's filled up this entire tank, filled up here, and now my printer is full of liquid experience. Now the main reason we did all of that is because you're now able to duplicate enchanted books. The way you do it is by getting your enchanted book, you right click over here as the filter and now put books down, and you'll see it will print these new books. There we go, and I'm going to pick one of those up. There we go. And as you can see, I've got another Fortune 5 book. So now if I combine these together, I can get the Fortune 6 and Fortune 7 that way instead. And not only that, I can just keep printing any kind of book if I've only got one. And this is super useful, especially if you've got some of the rarer enchantment books like Mending or other stuff that you might come across in your expeditions. So I don't know, I think that was like about 5 tips all in one there about getting liquid experience, the ore hammer, and then converting this, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. Another useful thing about those bottles of experience that you can get is that you can now craft the Ancient Knowledge Potion. As you can see, it's a really simple potion. You just use the Awkward Potion, combine it with a bottle of enchanting, and then from here, you can then take that and put another bottle of enchanting on it, which will then turn it into Ancient Knowledge 4. And you can see from here, you gain 1600% extra experience. So you don't necessarily need a better farm, you can just use the exact farm that you've got, but use these Ancient Knowledge Potions to get even more experience, then turn it back into the liquid experience and print even more books. Okay, so the next 2 things I want to show you are to do with mob farms specifically. Now the best way of having a mob farm other than using spawners is by using the GM Chicken Feed Curse. Now it's a pretty simple recipe, as you can see, spider eye, any old seed, bone, gunpowder, rotten flesh, and then 4 buckets of the experience or essence that we had before. And you can get those by using a bucket instead of a glass bottle on that XP tank that I showed earlier. Using this on a chicken, we'll explode it and then turn it into this egg here, the rotten egg. Now I'm going to whack the egg on here and you'll see it's turned it now into this dreadful dirt. And it'll do a 5x5 area of it. Now, something of note, it will only start spawning monsters once it's dark. So this then brings me on to the second tip, which is how do I light up an area without preventing mob spawns? And this is where a mod called Utilitarian comes in, where you can make this lapis light. As you can see, it lights up the area, but only client-sided. So this is how you'd make it. And then you can invert it with a lever so that it's always on. And so I can actually punch out all of these torches here and just replace it all with these lapis lights. And as you can see, we can now start getting spawns. So there we go. Now this itself is good for mob spawns, but it's not exactly fast. And this is where it gets to the second point, and probably what you saw earlier, these cog blocks. That's where they come in. Now if you power the dreadful dirt with a redstone signal, what will happen is it will actually spawn them even quicker. Now I use these cog blocks, but you can use anything. These are just really useful for transferring redstone signal across up, down, left, right, etc. So I've laced the base with these, and then you can just plug in any kind of clock, whether it's a redstone clock or even the pulse timer from Create. I'm going to use that as an example here. I'll avoid all these creepers. So all you need to do is then plug in a timer, set it to whatever time you'd like. So for example, I'm going to go really quick here, 2-tick timer. You'll see we're getting spawns very frequently. Now this area is pretty mobbed, so it's going to get chaotic quite quickly. So you'll see here, I'm going to keep killing the entities like this, and they are just spawning back in so quickly now that I've got this timer. Now you might have to adjust this setting here to get that optimal spawning rates, but as you can see, they're just still spawning in so frequently. And when I said earlier about putting in a redstone clock, you need to put a repeater after the redstone clock because the redstone clock will turn off. So something like this where, you know, you can see now. So the next tip I've got is going to be something that I think most people will be familiar with, but I'm going to hopefully show you something that you've never thought of before. Now, if you delve into Mechanism, one of the power/factory-based mods, one of the items I'd totally recommend you start with is the Precision Sawmill. And once you've placed it, you obviously need to give it power. And you can put sticks in here and it will turn it into sawdust. Now, 4 of those together will make a cardboard box. I'm going to turn that off because it is incredibly loud. Now, cardboard boxes are incredibly useful because if you come across a spawner, what you can do is just simply right-click it with the cardboard box and it will allow you to move the spawner from one place to another. And you shift right-click to take the cardboard box off. And you can do this with basically any single block. Now, I'm going to show you a really interesting technique that I've never seen someone show off. It's how you can break bedrock using cardboard boxes. This is a bug, but it's actually a vanilla bug, so I'm not entirely sure whether this will ever get patched or not. But what you can do is extend a piston, like so, then put a cardboard box over the extended piston, take this with you, and let's say there's some bedrock here. You place the cardboard box, like so, where the piston was extended, click, shift right click, and it will break bedrock. I've never seen someone talk about this, but it is so useful. The cool part is you can also do this vertically as well. So for example, I'm going to do it here, right click, and there we go. We've just broke bedrock again. And same with the other direction. We'll do that now. And boom. So you can easily break through the nether roof or even the void down at the bottom of the world. The next thing I want to show off is something that I think is incredibly underrated. And that is the market from farming for blockheads. As you can see, it requires a red wall, planks, and then just some logs around it. And the main reason I like this is you wait for him to spawn, he'll appear, and he provides most trades for seeds, saplings, and other materials here. I mean, everything's here. As you can see, you can get some of the rarer seeds and stuff that you'd probably have to go quite far out for. So for example, pumpkins, you can get pumpkin seeds, you can get melon seeds. You can also get saplings. So for example, acacia, you would normally have to go out to the savanna biome. If you've not got one nearby, the acacia sapling's right here. Same with all other types of trees like the cherry saplings, and even some like rarer ones to do with like fruit trees and things. So they're really good. You can also get the Ars Nouveau trees, which saves you having to go exploring. So if you do have some emeralds to spare, I would totally recommend this way of doing it. If you're looking for cactus, you can also get the barrel cactus seed, and that barrel cactus will produce barrel cactus, pretty obviously. And 2 of those here, if you put them in the crafting table, can make regular cactus. So you can also get cactus from this. So if you don't want to do all the exploring and trying to find biomes, that is probably your best bet. And whenever you've finished using him, you can just punch him and he will go away. I mentioned earlier about the abilities to use cardboard boxes to transfer spawners. But Ars Nouveau provides, in my opinion, one of the cheapest ways to have Silk Touch available to you. First of all, you'll obviously need this spellbook from Ars, and you'll actually need the Tier 2 spellbook. So this is the Tier 2 recipe. You first need the Tier 1 recipe, which is just iron tools, and the Tier 2 recipe requires you've gone to the Nether. You'll need blaze rods, quartz, obsidian, and then 3 diamonds. Once you've got your book, you can go over to the scribes table and right-click it with it, and you will get all of your tier glyphs that you can unlock. Now, we're obviously in the Tier 2, and the one that I'm trying to go for is the Extract. Extract only requires 5 levels and 1 emerald. So once you've done that, you press select, you toss the emerald into the scribe table, and once the animation's finished, you will get the glyph of extract. And once you right click it, if I was in survival mode, you'll use it up and you'll unlock extract in your book. And again, this won't be an Ars Nouveau tutorial, so I would totally recommend you go through the Ars guide. It's really comprehensive and really good, and it does not take very long to get to the end of this sort of quest line. The spell that we'll be using is Projectile, Break, and Extract. And as you can see, these first two are you're going to get by default. The Extract is the one that we've just added. You press Create, but now if I right-click something, it'll shoot a projectile, break the block, and you can see it's done Silk Touch on it. So now we've got grass. And if we had a monster spawner lying around, you can just right-click it, and you will get the monster spawner. Free of charge, and you don't even have to use durability on a tool or anything like that. Now, if you couldn't tell from my magic chest over here, the next section is going to be on exclusively Ars stuff. I think this mod has so many cool tips and tricks that people aren't aware of, and I'm going to show them all to you right now. Now, one of the things that people tend to do with mob farms is use fans to move things around. So as you can see here, we've got a mob fan, and then we've got a mob fan over here, and I'm just showing their area. And what people tend to do is they'll have them and then move them around like this. And there's nothing wrong with this technique, but we can make this even quicker. Now, Ars Nouveau allows you to craft this thing called source stone. As you can see, it's just any type of stone mixed with a source gem. I won't be showing you how to make source gems. You can then craft a warp scroll here, shift right click a location, so for example over here, and you basically build a nether portal out of source stone. Now the cool thing about this, it can be any kind of size. So I'm going to make a 1x2 style nether portal like this, and all you need to do is get yourself a full source jar. I think it needs to be 90% full for this to work, and then throw your warp scroll in. You will now have a warp portal to that location over there. So if I go through, you'll see I teleported straight away. Now the main reason I showed off this mob farm thing is because you can also build your portals flat. So if I had a huge portal like so, and I had maybe like a spawner farm above it, all I would need to do is throw this, and as you can see, they would get teleported when they jump straight in to that location there, and they're all in one location. So you could have something like a mob masher quickly dispatching all of those mobs at once because they've just instantly gone through the portal. There's no time faffing around waiting for them to move into the right position. They instantly teleport to that location. There is one caveat to that, and that is that you can't teleport them cross-dimensionally. Well, actually you can. You just have to use the stabilized warp scroll, which is a warp scroll that's gone through an enchanting apparatus with ender pearls and blaze powder. Now, regular warp scrolls can be used as like a sort of set home type thing where you right click here and then you can just right click it and you'll get teleported there. Now, if you're in survival mode, it would use that item. However, the stabilized warp scroll will actually be infinite uses and cross-dimensional. So if I went over here and recorded my location, what I can then do is go back to here, and I can just right-click the ground, and it will build me a portal, a temporary portal. This will all break very soon. Temporary portal that I can just go through, and I think this lasts about a minute. So you can just have, all of your mates or whatever teleport there very quickly. So if you haven't got to the point where you need to make waste stones and you've not got amethyst or emeralds or things like that just to go, the stabilized warp scroll is actually quite useful, or these warp portals in general. This then leads me on to another tip, which is going to be to do with producing the source needed in those source jars. So like I said, it requires a 90% full source jar. To get source, you need to have a source link, and there are various different ones available. They each produce source from different sources. It's got really source heavy. But the one that you'll probably start with is the agronomic source link, and that will produce source from nearby crops growing. One of the quickest source farms you can make is by using just 2 sand put together to make snad. And what snad does is it grows sugarcane and other crops that are put on top of sand quicker. So as you can see, it quickly grows the sugarcane. Now you can enhance this even more by putting those clocks like we did with the mob farm earlier. And as you can see, it's producing it very quickly. Every time this grows, and you'll see slowly this is filling it up, but that is pretty effective. I'll put another clock on this side so we're getting both sides working at the same time, and check that out. We're already at 6%. So the next thing I want to show off in Ars is the Drygmy. Now Drygmies will spawn all across your world and they'll look like this, little sort of horned beings. I have no clue. And if you give them a Wilden Horn, they'll get all excited and they will drop a Drygmy token. You can then pick this up, and using the enchanting apparatus, you can make a Drygmy charm. Once you've got a few of these Drygmy charms, you can start off with one, you can add loads, it doesn't matter. These will act as a sort of passive mob farm. So you can have an already existing farm here, and if you just right click a Drygmy charm onto a mossy cobblestone block, what will happen is it will, do a fun animation where this henge is created out of nowhere and your Drygmy will pop back in. He'll get all excited and he will start harvesting the resources from these different mobs. Now you do need to put a chest underneath or an inventory underneath, and give him access to some source. But once he's done, you will see that within time, he will also walk around. So sometimes it's best to trap these guys in. But if I add a few of these guys and then we wait a little bit, I've just skipped ahead by 200 seconds. And bearing in mind we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Drygmies. And you can see we've already built up a stockpile of some of these animal byproducts. And we've not even had to kill or do anything with these. This is just passive generation, which is really cool. This also works for hostile mobs, but the interesting part is you don't actually have to have these mobs out in the open like this. What you need to do is get the ritual brazier, provide it with some source, and then you need a tablet of containment. Quite a simple recipe. I'm not going to show you how to make the manipulation essence. Activate it. Anything that comes within the radius of the particles will be trapped in containment jars if there's space available. So I'm going to put a few containment jars down here, and no matter what mob comes in, so I'm going to get a zombie as an example, or we'll get a zombie horse, who knows, we'll get a zombie, it will then go into the jar, as you can see just there. If I put another mob down, it will also go into the jar. Now be careful, because if you do throw items down as an example, I'm going to throw that Drygmy charm, it will also get sucked up into the jar. Now, if, as an example, you have accidentally put some items in here, what can happen is you can just shift right-click, but this will only work for items. You can actually shift right-click these out. Now, obviously, you might want to turn this ritual off using a lever right next to it, and that will turn it off. But you cannot shift right-click the mobs out. The way that you do that is by using the glyph of Dispel. Not a particularly difficult recipe, as you can see, but you'd use Projectile Dispel here as a spell. You then shoot that, and you'll see the mob will come out. Now, it will go straight back in the jar if there is no redstone signal applied to this, so just be aware of that. Now, the fun part is that you can actually collect those jars of mobs and put them next to the Drygmy farm, and that will work in place of actually having them exist in the world. And once I put this down, and this then does its thing, it will produce the zombie drops. Now, as you can see, it's now produced the rotten flesh drop that I said earlier. Now, the more unique mobs in the area that you have, the more productive the Drygmies will actually be. So it pays to have a lot of different mobs. Now, that's where something I showed you guys earlier comes in handy. Now, earlier on, I showed you the polymorphic wand, and we were able to convert mobs into other mobs. In this case, that is perfect. So right now, I've got that tablet of containment turned off by the redstone signal. And if a mob walked into this area, and let's say we've already got it, like the zombie, I can then right-click it. We've now got the silverfish. I can then store that in one of the containers, as you can see there, and I've now got a completely unique mob. We can keep doing this. So, for example, a creeper. Now, obviously, if you were in survival mode, you'd have to be a little bit careful because, you know, you can't just let these things walk around. We can keep converting them. And now we've got a drowned, so that's perfect. Let's try and get him in a jar. So, as an example, we've now got a drowned in a jar. What's next? Zombie piglin. Perfect. We'll take him. We've also somehow picked up a squid as well, so that's fantastic. I think a squid walked into this area. Now, like I said, you can very easily get different mob spawns. A rabbit. That's really weird. I've never seen that. Well, there we go. We can also get a turtle. Quickly, save him. So as you can see, we can now kind of create a big, unique mob farm, which will actually increase the productivity of our Drygmy farm. So if we brought all of those things over there, not only do we get the drops of it, but they'll actually be quicker. And you can read a bit more about that in this book, where it explains about the happiness of Drygmies, and the more unique mobs you'll have, it produces more of the drops. So you can actually place these mobs on the jars within 10 blocks of his home, and you can have a sort of small passive generation of mob drops. So this is where I bring you to another one of the Just Dire Things items called the Creature Catcher, and as you can see, this is the blaze gold that we talked about earlier. You can capture any kind of mob in this, and you will get it as a drop. And then it's really simple. You just right click it like that, and it will then move the item. Now, obviously, I'm in creative, so it's kind of duplicated a few of those items, but that's a really easy way to bring things to the tablet of containment. You can put some really rare mobs in here and be able to produce their loot. Now, the examples I'm going to give you is Warden. You can actually store a Warden in one of these jars, and it will slowly produce resources. I've got one over here as an example, and it's produced the Heart of the Deep, some of the Warden stuff, really useful materials from the Warden. You can also use some of the Iron Spellbook mobs. So, for example, this is the Priest that you'll find in villages. I don't believe these actually respawn, so they're quite useful to keep hold of. Even more useful, you can go to some of the Cataclysm bosses. This is one as an example, the Netherite monstrosity. Now, if you're lucky, he just broke all my stuff, so maybe this one's a bit of a difficult one. But you can actually store him in a containment jar and generate his resources in that farm as well. I'm going to go and have to deal with this fella. Now, something of note is that things will be blacklisted from here. So, for example, the Wither, I believe, is blacklisted. It won't produce Nether Stars. And the Iron Golem is also blacklisted. And you'll see this when you capture it. It'll say Drygmy blacklisted. If it doesn't say that, you know that you are good to go and all of this will work as expected. Ars also has the best storage solution out of most mods in terms of early game. This might seem a little bit convoluted, but all you need is a ritual brazier, again, not a particularly difficult recipe, the Tablet of Awakening, which requires all of those different types of saplings, so you either have to go explore in the world or use that market that I showed off earlier. You right-click there and right-click with a book and quill. Then right-click again, and you will get a charm of Bookworm, or Bookworm charm. Once you've got that, you need 2 other items, one being the Storage Lectern, which just requires, now don't look at this recipe because it's all confusing, you just need 4 regular chests and a lectern in the enchanting apparatus. Now, if you go through the Ars questline, this will be a piece of cake. You'll already know how to make this. It's really simple, just gold and archwood planks. And you'll also need the Dominion Wand. Again, super simple recipe, just requiring some of those source gems and gold. And the way this works is you place down the storage lectern and you have chests dotted around, and all you do is simply shift right click the chest with the Dominion Wand and then right click the storage lectern, and it will add that as an inventory. You can do this, I believe, 8 times per bookworm charm that you have. So in this case, I've got 3 connected inventories and I just need to put 1 bookworm down. And as you can see, I now have an AE style interface for all of my items, and they will appear in these chests over here as an example. And I can still use all the crafting recipe stuff that I've seen from JEI, using this, and it will craft everything up. But something really interesting is it doesn't really care what those inventories are. So for example, a double chest, as long as you've got one of the chests selected, that's fine. You can extend that storage space. Or you can use something like the sophisticated storage, upgradable storage, where, you put a barrel in with iron to get an iron barrel, and then diamond and whatever, and you've got a lot more space. You can also add these as well. But ultimately, the best item I've found that works the best for this system is using a Create Vault. Create Vaults store this amount of items, but in a smaller area. Super useful. Create Vaults are made by using just a barrel and then iron plates. Now, I showed you an easier recipe to get those iron plates earlier by using the ore hammer. However, you will get less for your yield. But these are really interesting because I can use them on their own to make a vault, or I can use them in a 2x2 fashion and then extend that on. Or, most importantly, I can create a 3x3 vault here, like that, and then extend it outwards. And you can make these absolutely massive. There you go. That is the max size vault that you can make. And the funniest part is you can use this as just one inventory and store every one of your items in these vaults. It's super effective. In fact, I would say that vault storage is one of the best ways of storing items in this game. You can even have an applied energistics set up early game for this. So for example, I can then put a storage bus, then link it in with a cable, and put a terminal here. And the way that I power it is by either giving it power with an energy acceptor, but the best way is probably using this crystal resonance generator. And now I have a fully functioning AE system that literally just links this one vault. In my own survival world, I'm at the end game. I've already completed the ATM start, and I only had to use 2 full-sized Create Vaults, which is insane. You don't need to make any drives, any complicated stuff. You can just literally use vaults. Now, I'm going to show you how to get early game access to the Bumblezone really quickly. So the best way you're going to do this is by crafting a piston, get a lever, craft an oak log with a wooden sword to get the oak nest. You just plonk it down, plonk a piston down, stand in between, and lever, and you will be teleported to the Bumblezone. As it says at the bottom, it will take a while the first time because it's got to generate those chunks, but as you can see, that is how you get to the Bumblezone. Now, make sure you've set your home beforehand. You can get out of the Bumblezone legitimately, but it's so much easier if you just have a /home to get back. And the Bumblezone itself is incredibly useful because you have access to loads and loads of these honeycomb blocks. Now, honeycomb blocks can obviously be made into the honeycomb itself by just crafting it with itself. And once you've got access to all of these honeycomb blocks, you can literally just uncraft them into honeycomb or keep them as the honeycomb blocks. But the honeycomb itself can be used in tons of recipes, candles, and there's loads of other recipes that involve it. Occultism uses candles heavily, so I would totally recommend coming to here for all your honeycomb needs. And so the Bumblezone itself is actually really good for progressing and helping you progress through the productive bees and get maybe like a little bit of a head start on it. It also provides a lot of really interesting things. So for example, there's some cave spiders up there. I see some honey slimes down here. Now these drop slime balls and sugar, so it's really good to have in some of the farms that produce that. You also get access to loads of different comb blocks. So for example, here's gold comb, and you could centrifuge these into actual gold. I've got 2 main things that I'd also like to show you. One being that if you have the Nature's Compass, you can get this from a quest, but also it's pretty easy to craft on its own. And if you type in the pollinated fields, course, I spawn in a world where it's like 1,000 blocks away, but usually this won't be that far away. Now, the pollinated fields themselves have more of those spawns, like I said about, and also produces these piles of pollen. Now, if you use Ultimine and just click like that, you'll get a ton of these pollen puffs. Now, pollen puffs can be used to make honey treats when combined with a honeycomb. They're used for practically everything. You've got the upgrade base, that uses it. You've got the treat on a stick, so if you find a bumblebee and put a saddle on him, you can then ride him and lead him around like this. And yeah, like I said, you can use it for bee spawning. So for example, all of these bees require the honey treat to work and actually spawn in. Or you can use the incubation. So if you put a baby into if you put a baby bee into the incubation and feed it 20 honey treats, it will also grow up. So this is the best place to come for your honey treats. Another interesting thing is that you might, in your adventures, come across a hanging gardens. Now, they're not particularly rare, and if you've got an explorer's compass, which will be late game, definitely not an early game thing, you can find it easier. But if you just sort of hover around, fly around a little bit, you'll occasionally find one. Yeah, so here we go. Here's an example of a hanging gardens. These basically include every single flower in the game. So this can actually give you access to some of the flowers that you might either haven't explored just yet or haven't found. One of the biggest things that I've found that's quite useful is a torch flower. Now, of course, I can't find one as I'm searching, so I might have to show you that. Yep, so as you can see, you can find the torch flower here. The main reason I showed off the torch flower is because that's the one that I believe is required for the impure red chalk in occultism, which is a bit of a pain because if you don't have this, you have to use the sniffer and all sorts. And you may be wondering how I'm actually getting all of these things to appear and have these glowing sort of lines around it. I'm going to show you that really quickly. If you use the ritual brazier and the tablet of scrying, which here's the recipe, kind of simple, kind of easy to make, you use that, and then you right-click with any sort of item that you want to look for, in this case the torch flower. You then right-click again, and it will take a long while, about 30 seconds or so, but you will then get the scrying effect, which will then show you the location of other things. So you could put this with ores, you could put this with other things. It's a really, really useful thing to have. And once this is finished, you'll see now I have glowing particles over every single torch flower, even the ones that I can't see. So for example, that one that we saw back over there. But like I said, once you've got one, it's really easy because you just need to right click them with bone meal and you'll have infinite flowers. Fantastic. Now the main reason I showed off the hanging gardens is because inside the hanging gardens, there are these useful little flowers over here called the crystalline flower. And you'll come across these. I think there's also one over there, as you can see in the distance, just there. And what you do, I'm going to go into survival. You need experience for this, and you can go up to this flower and start putting in experience, and you will also need books. So I'm going to put in 3 levels of experience, and you can see every single one of the enchantments in this game is now available. Now, obviously you see here there's a level and a tier cost, so you might have to put even more experience to get some of the more important ones. So for example, Mending, I believe, is a very expensive one. Yeah, there you go, tier 6. And then you'll be able to select something. So if I want Mending, I can actually get it from here. Boom. And then, yeah, you'll also get these honey crystal shards as a byproduct as well. So really cool and a really nice way if you've not got something, or you know, if you want to avoid villager trades for some of your enchants, like one that I quite like is the Knowledge of the Ages. I don't believe this has a recipe, so that's one of the only ways to actually get it other than enchanting and villager trades. So you can get this, and then, like I showed earlier, you can use that printing technique to get even more, which is super, super useful. Now, something super interesting as well is that normally bees stop producing honeycombs if it's either raining or if it's night, and I know you can get genetic upgrades to fix that. But something really funny is that isn't the case in the Bumblezone as far as I can see. You can still have bees, you know, outside whilst it's snow, rain, nighttime, whatever. They will still produce combs no matter what. So if you have all of your bee stuff in the Bumblezone, they will just keep producing combs no matter what the weather is. So interestingly, this is also a vanilla mechanic because bees will always be productive in the end. And I believe this also extends over to the Bumblezone. So later on, if you decide to build a farm of bees, you can also do it in the end. And again, you'll have no weather troubles or nighttime troubles. So you don't even need to really bother with all the genetic component stuff. Now, one of the first things I would prioritize in the ATM 10 pack is the Easy Villagers mod. And the main reason I say that is because you can produce 2 really easy items. The first one being this farmer. The farmer here is a dirt block, 2 iron, a water bucket, and some glass panes. All you need to do is go up to one of your villagers, shift right click, and you will now have him as an item. And you can just plonk him around wherever you want. In this example, I'm going to use him and right click him on the farmer. Then you put a crop. Whatever crop you want to put in, I'm going to put carrots as an example. And then he will start to grow carrots. If I right click his inventory, I can see all of the outputted items. And this is where the carrots will go. So what I can do is really quickly make a carrot farm by putting a chest, putting a hopper, and now I will have infinite carrots just being produced from this small setup. So as an example, he's just harvested those carrots, they've gone into the hopper, and now we've got them here. So this is really good for just a quick early game farm. The second thing I'd suggest is this iron farm. Really easy recipe, you just need a lava bucket instead of the water and using stone instead. And it will produce iron golems, they'll burn in the lava, and it will produce you iron instead. These two things are super useful, super pivotal for starting off any world. Iron itself is used in so many recipes. In fact, it's one of the things you'll be using all the time. As you can see, 1,300 pages of crafting recipes just using iron itself. There is tons. You need to have it. And everyone needs food. You always need to feed yourself. So those are the first two things I would be setting up instantly in ATM if I can get access to them. So that was just a handful of the tips and tricks I can give you guys for ATM 10. I've really rarely seen posted anywhere else. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to slap the like button. Let me know in the comments which one's your favorite. And if you've got any more tips and tricks, put them in the comment section. People will find that so useful. So please try and assist other players who are just getting started with ATM 10. It's a great mod pack. It's so much fun. I've had a blast with it. And if you want to see more tips and tricks or maybe some stuff that I've missed, let me know in the comments. I might start a little series, who knows?